We welcome you to this webinar on ACUMEN. The word acumen has very broad meanings. It talks about financial acumen, technical acumen, acumen in a certain functional area of a business. Certainly financial acumen is a universal requirement of all leaders. And so for today's webinar, we have a special treat. A friend and colleague, Kevin Cope, is the founder of ACUMEN Learning, the leading authority on business and financial acumen training. Kevin's ideas and business models have been taught in over 30 countries and to more than 100,000 people, including 19 of the Fortune 50. For over 25 years, Kevin has promoted the idea that the brightest minds in business understand the essence of how a company makes money, and they use this knowledge to impact their bottom line. Kevin is not only a successful executive and trainer, he's also a sought-after keynote speaker and author of the #1 Wall Street Journal and New York Times bestseller, Seeing the Big Picture. Kevin, we welcome you to our webinar today and invite you to kind of give us your ideas about financial acumen.
Thank you, Jack, and happy to be here. And on this topic of business acumen, I've got 3 objectives for our next few minutes together. Number 1, I'd like to answer the question of what business acumen is. 2, why is it important? And 3, how can I improve it? Now, as you think about business acumen, there are a lot of different definitions out there. If you Google it, you'll find different ones. If you ask even different organizations, you'll find different definitions. And so we've established one that works for us, and that is business acumen is understanding how your company makes money and acting to improve the money-making process. So there's 2 parts to that. One is understanding your business, and the second part of that is making good decisions around your business. And so in other words, business acumen is working smart. Well, this reminds me of a commercial I once saw overseas. It showed this man coming out of an apartment building, and of course, as you can see in the picture, fresh snow had fallen on the ground, and the cars were all covered with 4 or 5 inches of snow. Well, he goes over to his car, and he spends several minutes actually cleaning off his car, and he's doing a real thorough job. And at the end, you can see a smile of satisfaction on his face. And he pulls out his key fob, and he pushes the button to unlock the doors. And to his dismay, the car next to the one he just scraped actually had the lights turn on and the horn honk. And so he realized he had just scraped the wrong car. Well, I believe this is a great metaphor for thinking about business acumen. Even if your employees are working hard, they're working efficiently, if they're not working on the right things, not aligned around what your company needs, then it's probably wasted effort and wasted energy. And so business acumen is understanding the right things to work on in your business. Well, so as you think about business acumen and want to assess your own business acumen, let me give you a quick quiz. I want to ask you about 7 or 8, 9 questions about your company's performance. Now, here's where I'm gathering these questions from. We've had a chance to work with 19 of the Fortune 50. We've worked in over 30 countries, taught in all 7 continents. That last one, by the way, Antarctica, just happened a couple of weeks ago, and I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek on this. I actually took a couple of my cruise mates aside and taught them the content, charged a nominal fee, but legitimately in 6 continents. But what we've learned in studying all of these organizations, talking to many executives, we've gotten a sense of what they focus on most, what measures are most important to them, and also what Wall Street tends to track for their organization. So let me ask you these questions, and why don't you consider how you're doing in your own organization around each of these. See if you know how your company is performing. So first question, how much cash does your company have on hand? Next question, what were your cash from operations last year? And sometimes cash from operations is also referred to cash flow. Next question, what is your net profit margin? And I'm looking for a percentage on that. Fourth question, what is your return on assets, or ROA, also a percentage? What is your equity ratio? And as you consider your sales, are they growing, flat, or in decline? And the same thing for profits. What are your profits? Are they growing, flat, or in decline? And then how do your results compare to your competition's? How do you stack up? Where are you better? Maybe where are you struggling or behind? And then maybe the most important question is, How are your decisions impacting each one of these measures? You know, when we first started this organization in 2002, my sense was that business acumen and questions like these were relevant for the frontline individual because everybody else in the company understood it. What we quickly found out is that there's a pretty big gap. Now, with frontline employees, they'll know an average about 1 out of these 9 or 10 questions. But even as you go to senior level individuals, VP level individuals in most organizations, they might only know 2 or 3 of these. And so I found and continue to learn that the gap in business acumen is pretty large in almost every industry and every organization. My sense of why that's happened is as companies grow, they tend to specialize, and individuals then become very expert in their role, phenomenal in their role or their function, but they tend to lose that big picture perspective of how their companies make money. They lose that sense of business acumen. So now that we've talked about what business acumen is, let's next look at why is business acumen important, and let me suggest 3 things. First of all, your business results. Your company needs people who see the big picture and who make good business decisions. I was talking with a CLO just a couple of weeks ago in a large hotel chain, and she described how she needed her property managers, those individuals who manage a hotel, to make better business decisions. She found that oftentimes they were waiting for corporate to tell them what to do. But the reality was these hotel managers, they had a better sense of their local market, their specific needs, their property needs, and so she was needing them to upscale or upskill their own business acumen. And as I think about business results, 2 great examples come to mind. One is in an effort to reduce their carbon footprint at UPS a number of years ago, they started routing trucks to eliminate left-hand turns. Now, what's wrong with a left-hand turn? Well, as you think about it, you've got to wait for a light, and also you're crossing traffic. So UPS found that there were a greater number of accidents when people were turning left, their drivers were turning left. So by eliminating left-hand turns, this idea has shaved more than 119 million miles off their routes and reduced CO2 emissions by hundreds of thousands of metric tons. And of course, it's improved their bottom line as well. Another great example of business acumen in action is with Alcoa. And in 1999, Alcoa makes aluminum. They gathered a team of engineers and researchers together to figure out the best way to fit a 12-pack of soda in the fridge. Now, of course, soda cans are made of aluminum. And what they came up with was the fridge pack. And this idea increased Coke sales by more than 10% in its first year. So again, here's a small team of individuals exercising great business acumen and having a big impact to their company's bottom line. Well, so in addition to business results, here's the second reason why business acumen is important, and that's for personal credibility. You need business acumen to get a seat at the table. So what is the table? The table is where executives of a company, they create strategy, they make decisions, they analyze their performance, and identify where there are gaps in their performance and how they're going to improve that. And the only way to get a seat at that table and keep that seat at the table is if you can contribute, add value. I remember a number of years ago, early in my career, I was a sales leader and had a chance to get a seat at the table. And I recall in one discussion, they were talking about our business and financial results. And as they were talking about it, I realized, man, I'm not tracking with this conversation very well. And I didn't want to show my ignorance, so I sort of had this half smile to sort of suggest that I knew what was going on and was tracking. In reality, I didn't. And you can be sure I contributed nothing to that conversation. Well, I left that determined to improve my own business acumen and to better understand that company's results and performance and how I could contribute to that. Well, a third reason why business acumen is important is employee engagement. As we know, your employees are giving their best effort and their best work when they're engaged in the business. Gallup organization recently put the cost of lack of engagement at about $500 billion, or $500 billion. So this is a significant issue for many organizations, most organizations. I saw this study from the Corporate Leadership Council, and it was on employee engagement. And what they found, the top two levers of engagement. Number one, connection between work and organizational strategy. And number two, the importance of job to organizational success. And for me, that greatly aligned what employees need to be better engaged with what we've been talking about. Business acumen is helping people get clear line of sight to their organization's strategy, success, and performance measures. And if your frontline leaders can't do that for your own employees, you're missing an opportunity to get better engagement and therefore better productivity out of your employees. As we know, the millennials especially want to have a clear sense of how they fit in, how they make a difference, how they matter. And so that relies on good line leaders who can help create that line of sight for them. Well, so how can I improve my own business acumen? Let me give you a couple of suggestions. Number one, become a student of your own company. And there's a couple of things you can do around that. Listen to your quarterly earnings calls and get help if you're not understanding what's being said. Those earnings calls are where your executives are being accountable to shareholders. So they're talking about the key performance measures. They're talking about your performance. And if you're not understanding what's being said, you're missing a great opportunity to be involved, to contribute, and make a difference. So if you don't understand, consider maybe an inside coach within the organization. Maybe it's somebody from finance. Maybe it's an executive that is willing to help. Maybe it's a peer. If that seems uncomfortable, there's a lot of resources outside your organization. Look online. There are a lot of books. There's a lot of training on this, formal or online training. But become a student of your company. And as part of that, make sure you know what key measures are important to your CEO. Figure out why they're important, what they're telling you, and how you can help to improve those. If they're important to your CEO and your executive team, they ought to be important to you, especially if you want to make a difference and be credible in the business. The second thing is study your industry. Take 15 or 20 minutes out of your day to read industry and business news. Every morning, somewhere early in the morning, Google Finance is one of my favorite places to get business and industry news. I don't own shares in Google, so I'm not recommending this other than I think it's a great place and resource to get information. If you go on Google Finance, right off the bat, you'll see the stock market, the news, and what's moving that. You can also select a couple of companies to track in a portfolio. And of course, you'd want to pick your own company, maybe companies in your industry. Could also include a major client or possibly a supplier. But you can actually click on a tab that will give you news just for the companies you are tracking. So it's an easy way to get to your industry's news and information and what's going on there. Well, so what did we learn? My hope is that we now know what business acumen is, we know why it's important, and we know what we can do to improve it. In conclusion, let me suggest this as a bottom line. Business acumen won't automatically make you or anybody else a great business leader, but without it, you'll never become one. As an offer to help and maybe give you a head start, if you're interested, we have a job aid. You can reach out to us at info@acumenlearning.com. This job aid will help you answer those quick quiz questions I gave you. It will show you where in the financials to look and the calculations you need to make. So we'll offer that up for those that might be interested. Last, I want to thank you for your participation in this. I know your time is valuable, and so I sincerely hope it was a good use of your time. And I want to wish you all the best of luck as you continue to build your own business acumen. I'll now turn it back to Joe. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kevin, and we appreciate your thoughts on financial acumen. We're going to define acumen much broader than that, as really in a broad way, technical capabilities and expertise in a variety of fields. The question comes up when an organization really needs to get something done that's very important. What skills are essential? And what we've seen about that is there's two really critical skills. The first one seems to be acumen. Do you know what you're doing? Do you understand the thing we're trying to create, the project we're getting done? Do you have the expertise to do it? But once that's there, the second thing is execution. Well, can we get this done? And we did a study where we looked at these two attributes, acumen and execution. And we said, wonder if you had a strength in acumen, but not in execution. And then we looked at the best leaders, those leaders at the 90th percentile, the best leaders we could find in our database. And we said, well, what's the probability you'd be successful? What's the probability you'd be a great leader if you had deep acumen but not very good skills in execution? And it's 7%. Well, then we looked at the opposite. So if you had execution skills at the 75th percentile or higher, but you weren't very good at acumen, what's the probability there? And a lot of people say, well, it's a lot better. It's significantly better. Well, actually, it's only 12%. Okay, so even if you're really good at that execution, if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have the expertise, the probabilities of success aren't great. But wonder if you do both. You'd expect 19%, but you actually get 79% of the leaders. And what that's telling us is 79% of the best leaders really had that acumen. They were in the top quartile or higher, but they also were good at execution. What we're going to make a point here, and we're going to explore this more as we go, is that we think acumen is an absolutely critical skill, but it's best when you combine it with other skills.
You know, Joe, there was a time when management skills were highly revered. 50 years ago, it was a very prevailing idea that, a manager is a manager is a manager, and he or she can manage a pizza factory or a retail shoe store or move to a high technology, and that those management skills were extremely portable. And then a Harvard Business School professor, John Kotter, wrote a book called The General Managers, in which he pointed out that while that was kind of a prevailing theory, that in reality, the general managers that he identified and studied were all very technically competent in the underlying kind of business that they were in. And so he began to really dispel this idea that general managers were there because of their managerial skills, but made it clear that there needed to be more than that. They needed to have a high level of technical acumen in the field that they were managing.
Well, let's study that effect, and we wanted to look at data that actually confirmed or disconfirmed that theory that acumen is critical and that managers need to have technical expertise to manage well. What we did is we looked at ratings of acumen for leaders in general and for top managers, and then we looked at overall leadership effectiveness. Here's what we found. If you were in the bottom 10% on acumen, the average leadership effectiveness rating that you received, general managers, was the 12th percentile. And then we looked at it and we thought, well, maybe that's not as important for top managers. Top managers don't need to be, they don't need to understand the deep aspects of the business. But it turns out that if you were a top manager in the bottom 10 percentile, you also were at the 12th percentile in terms of leadership if, again, you had a low level of acumen. But as acumen increased, what we see is this tendency for your overall leadership effectiveness to increase. It was this indicator. It's sort of like if you don't have the acumen, you're never going to be perceived as a great leader. We then did a study where we looked at high potentials, right? And what we looked at is, again, those acumen scores and the percentage, in other words, the possibility that you would be rated as a high potential if you had low levels of acumen versus high levels of acumen. And what you see is that, again, that acumen score increased the percentage of people that might be rated as high potential. The point of both these studies is we believe that acumen is a very critical element in A, you being perceived as a very effective leader, and B, you being rated as a high potential, one of the top people with potential in the company. Now, this third study we did looked at acumen, but it looked at it over age and also by gender. what you see is this initial start-out position where males seem to be rated with higher acumen levels than females in their is 25 years and 25 to 30 years. But you see, as it always does, that gap closes, right? And then you see men and women are essentially the same. But they're about at the 50th percentile. Now, what's interesting is if we look at the best leaders, those at the 75th percentile or higher, and look at their acumen ratings, what you see is continually throughout their career high performance on acumen. And again, we're just making the point. Having high performance in acumen seems to be correlated with high levels of leadership effectiveness.
Which then takes us to the question of why does acumen impact leadership effectiveness so powerfully? And we like to propose a series of possible explanations. First of all, because complexity is increasing in organizations. That's obviously a strong determining factor. Secondly, because leaders and managers need to understand the technology in order to effectively lead. As we've showed, it causes them to have greater respect from the people with whom they work. A third possibility is that as technology continues to increase exponentially, the need for acumen just keeps skyrocketing. Another explanation may be that those who don't understand the basics of the business really have limited value to the organization and become more irrelevant as the organization moves forward. And maybe it's because competitors are increasing and leaders need to inspire the innovation within their own organization. So there's all kinds of potential explanations, but we certainly know that acumen is a critical competency.
You know, Jack, as I meet with leaders, I find leaders who are put in positions where they don't really understand technical aspects of the job that they're in. I divide them into two piles. Those that are sort of riding the bus and figure, I'll just wait this out. I don't really want to learn about this function. And inevitably, they're having a very negative experience, and people are rating them very low. The other ones, they were put into a position, but they do everything they can to learn about their position. And I just think, what we're saying in this is that if you're put in a position where you don't really understand what's going on, you really need to learn, and you really need to take the time to learn what's going on because it's so critical.
Those of you who are familiar with our work know that we have approached this idea about how can you get better at something, how can you improve your skills in a given competency. And we've kind of had two broad categories. We've talked about linear development and a nonlinear approach. And what's fascinating about our topic today is that probably more than virtually any other, the linear approach has a lot of relevance and a lot of power in helping people develop all kinds of acumen, whether it's business acumen, financial acumen, technical acumen, or acumen in a given functional area.
So, Jack, let me ask you a question. You weren't expecting this,
Yeah.
but I wanted to catch you off guard.
Yeah, sure.
I just see you as doing a great job of keeping up and being on the edge. What's your secret? What's your big? There's got to be a big secret here.
Well, you're kind. Maybe I'm intellectually curious, and I love to kind of read the latest and best research. I think that the success of virtually any discipline hinges upon the ability of people who are in it to find the best research and to apply it.
Yeah.
And what's motivated me as much as anything in this field has been, where is the good research, and let's follow that research. So that's my only. You have the most contagious curiosity in the world. Well, I hope that's true. So anyway, in technical acumen, certainly, or financial acumen, reading books, going to classes, studying on your own, finding a good mentor, all of those things that we've listed in that cluster there of linear development approaches are all very relevant to this topic. On the other side, however, are things that we've called the nonlinear developmental approach. And, these are what we've called sort of companion behaviors, or we've used the metaphor of cross-training that's involved in athletics, where by doing certain other behaviors, it helps people to see the acumen that you possess more clearly. It may help you to develop greater acumen. For a variety of reasons, these other kind of nonlinear behaviors really do help in being perceived as a person who possesses high acumen. So the research that Joe did on this topic would say this. As you look at the topic of acumen and you say, what are those other behaviors that people who possess high levels of acumen have, and virtually people who possess low levels of acumen don't have, you see those bubbles that go around this the outside edge as being those things that we've called companion behaviors. The one at the very top, at the 12 o'clock kind of position about solving problems, what we know is that if people understand good problem-solving techniques, that they know how to collect information, they know the importance of kind of walking around that information and assembling it and getting a good picture of the current state, and then to kind of be able to kind of choose 3 alternative possible solutions and to analyze the consequences and the value of each of those alternatives, and then to kind of finally select from those alternatives the best one, or to create some combination of them. Just knowing how to solve problems is a very powerful companion behavior. It doesn't give you more knowledge, but it helps take advantage of the knowledge that you possess. Another one is relationship building. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you and possess a great deal of acumen, but if people don't relate well with you, your acumen doesn't get disseminated. Your acumen doesn't have the impact on the organization. Communicating powerfully, the third one at the kind of 3 o'clock position. Again, the impact of your acumen rests very squarely on your ability to communicate it, have other people understand it, to be able to express it in terms that are clear, and to have the willingness to kind of communicate frequently and prolifically. Well, I won't go through all the rest of them, but as you can see, whether it's pursuing excellence, whether it's taking more initiative, whether it's developing others, all of these are powerful companion behaviors to this thing that we call acumen.
So let's go through these and identify your idea or our idea about how we could help you to create or improve your acumen. Is if you do have pretty good acumen, choose a couple of these companion behaviors to help you become better. And we're going to walk through each one, give you some ideas and suggestions about these different ones. So let's start with solving problems and analyzing issues. Acumen is knowledge. It's technical expertise. Solving problems, it's the ability to apply that knowledge. Over the last few years, we've hired different programmers. We hired a programmer who really didn't have a lot of education. I mean, he didn't even have a degree in it, but he lived it. He just, every day, he thinks like a computer. We hired a programmer who had a master's degree in computer science. And he was here for a couple of years. And after a couple of years, it became really clear that while he could give you all the theory, he couldn't really write good code. And it was so interesting to look at the difference between these two. And so, again, Jack's talked about this. Knowledge and solving problems is a great way to demonstrate your expertise or show that you have it. The next one is about relationship building. There's this fascinating study by Kelly and Kaplan that's done at Bell Labs. What they did at Bell Labs, and this is back in the heyday of Bell Labs, when Bell Labs was the premier research institution. They hired the best and brightest scientists in the world. And you have lots of Nobel scholars coming out of Bell Labs because of the research that they were doing. Well, Kelly and Kaplan went through a process of identifying what they called the star performers. These were the brightest and best scientists. And then the question was, what differentiated the star performers? Were they smarter? Did they go to better schools? Well, they looked at their intelligence, and guess what? They hired all bright people. You couldn't separate people by, they weren't necessarily smarter. They didn't go to better schools. What were the things that differentiated the stars from the others? Well, it was things like helping colleagues to solve problems on a complex task, or giving others credit, or listening to others' ideas. There were a lot of the things they talked about that had to do with relationship building skills and networking skills rather than technical ability that really helped them to be successful. Jack, you've read a lot about this.
Well, yeah, in fact, my favorite story out of that book was the story about this young woman who didn't graduate from the very best in school and didn't have the very highest grades, but she had this propensity to, when a new piece of software came along that needed to be used by all of the scientists, rather than having everybody on their own kind of go through all the drill of learning it and learning how to install it, she just raised her hand and said, "Look, I'll do it for everybody." And she went around and installed this new software on everybody's computer. And it's that kind of relationship building, taking initiative. It was not the technical knowledge. It wasn't this, wasn't the degree that she had. It was her ability to relate with others. The next one we've talked about is this whole idea of communication. And here on the slide, we've depicted some people that we often associate with as being great communicators. I don't want anybody to be put off by the fact that 2 of the 3 were assassinated. That's not we don't want to have you live a more dangerous life. But as you think about the people who have impacted the business world, communication skills really are at the heart very often of that ability. So take a Steve Jobs. Yes, he was a wonderful designer. He had a love for the product. There were lots of things that he did that contributed to Apple. But one thing that he did was his ability to present at their annual conference a very compelling, engaging story of the latest new device. And his communication skills that he really honed over the years were an important part of the contribution that he made to Apple. I think of Warren Buffett. People buy Berkshire Hathaway stock because they want to get a copy of his annual report. It's funny, it's honest, it's engaging, it's informative. Buffett has, kind of remained a very powerful communicator. I think of Clayton Christensen, the professor at Harvard Business School, who's written on disruption and innovation. And his great contribution and the fact that he's recognized as kind of the number one thinker in management today is his ability to communicate and his willingness to take the time to kind of write about his ideas.
You think about sometimes when you hear a presentation and all you hear is wah, wah, wah. I mean, technical babble, and you're trying to understand what is it, what are we trying to do? We're not speaking the same language here, and in order to be effective, if you have technical depth, this ability to communicate is a critical skill. And what we found is it's trainable.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this one is that for those of you who have participated in presentation skills training, you've had the experience of seeing at the end of one day people's ability to put together a good presentation, to deliver it in a compelling and interesting way, goes up dramatically. And you can see it in the videotape at the end of the day. And so whether it's presentation skills or writing skills, it's a very trainable capability.
Another one of the companion behaviors is this desire to pursue excellence. And what we have on this graph here is we look at this one dimension, establishes high standards of excellence for your work group. And again, your effectiveness on that bottom 10%, top 10%. And then just acumen. And what you see is this absolute clear correlation between these two attributes, that as people increased their excellence, this drive for excellence, the acumen went up. This is a perceptual phenomena that these two kind of go together, that the one influences the other. We also looked again at performance levels, high performers, average, low performers, or need to improve. And then we looked at two attributes. We looked at establishes high standards and is trusted by others to make good decisions. And again, you can see the correlation there, that those two attributes stood out as very strong. So another way to improve, or a companion behavior for that, is focusing on trying to get higher levels of excellence and instigating that in your work.
Joe and I were talking about a colleague the other day who had been employed by us for a few years, and he decided to return to school, graduate school, to get a master's degree. We, of course, both encouraged him a great deal, wrote letters for his admittance to graduate school programs. He was admitted, and we were just kind of musing about how he really, at every turn, took every opportunity. He took initiative at every opportunity. So if we invited him to attend a course on coaching, rather than just kind of attending the course as a way of understanding our business a little bit better, he wanted to be certified, and so that he could train other people on how to do it. And at every turn, and Joe, you were talking about how he'd come in to see you about doing an international trip together.
Yeah. He says, let's go together. I need to do an international trip. I'll tag along. And I thought, wow, this is okay. I'd love to have some company, especially going to China. He's a great example of that. And again, we looked at this performance data where we looked at high performers, and we just looked at 232 engineers because, again, that's a very technically oriented profession. But what we see here is when people took initiative, the likelihood that they would be viewed as a high performer went way up. And so we think that is a critical attribute. So many people wait to be told, or they sort of sit back, and I use the expression, when you go to the water park, there's the lazy river. These people are riding on that tube, and they get off, but they don't go against the current.
The next companion behavior, developing other people. I think we all know from our experience that when we're asked to teach something, that we take it more seriously. We realize that we're going to need to convey this information, so we become better students of it. But one of the things we see is that the way to have people perceive your acumen in a better light is by your willingness to share it with other people and to pass it on. And particularly if you're a manager, for you to be aware of what the aspirations, the career ambitions are of the people who report to you, to provide them with developmental assignments that are tailored to helping them learn what they need to learn. And then you're being willing to kind of coach them and take time with them and pass on your wisdom and pass on your experience. All of those become ways of magnifying how you're perceived in terms of the acumen you possess in any given field. Finally, I think you very much set the example. Our research has shown pretty clearly that people perceive your commitment to their development through the lens of, to what degree do you develop yourself, and do you kind of practice a constant effort to kind of get better at your position, your job.
And the data we looked at last night, Jack, showed that developing that people's desire to learn and grow in their job was one of the biggest factors affecting their engagement. So people really want that, and that's a big expectation at work. Another characteristic of, again, these leaders that had high levels of acumen, one of these companion behaviors is honesty and integrity. Now, I struggle with this a little bit, but I wanted to really demonstrate the effect of if you were perceived as having low levels of honesty, what effect would that have on your perception of acumen? And what you see there is this dramatic graph that shows you, hey, if people don't think you're honest, they don't think you know squat. Okay, that's the bottom line there. I mean, if they feel like you're dishonest, they don't trust what you say. So, I mean, again, one of the characteristics that if people sort of question your motives, right, or don't feel like you're going to follow through on commitments, they don't trust what you say and your judgment in that.
The research that we've seen about trust that really makes the greatest sense to us is that trust is very much increased by people's perceptions of your reliability, of your credibility, of the warmth of the relationship that exists between you and them. And trust is very much diminished by your perceived self-interest. If people perceive that you're doing this because you want something from them, you want their money, or you want to improve your image, then it goes down. And so trust is very much hinged to how people perceive your level of business acumen.
And this next characteristic, trusted act in the team's best interest. Once again, when we looked at the data and we measured is trusted to act, trusted by all members of the work group, and then we looked at acumen. If people distrusted you, they didn't feel like you knew anything. They didn't trust your technical ability. So that ability to generate trust also helps with your ability to really have people believe what you say.
So to wrap up this whole idea of acumen, I guess maybe one way of summarizing it would be to say that acumen is an extremely necessary attribute for leaders to possess, but it isn't sufficient by itself. That it's very necessary to be perceived as being competent and capable, but it needs to be combined with some other things. It's a little bit like if you go to a physician or to a dentist. This person may be extremely knowledgeable and may have all the answers to the technical questions, but if they don't display some other characteristics, warmth and caring and some kind of bedside manner, chances are you may go elsewhere for your medical or your dental care. So we hope that this discussion of acumen has kind of helped you to kind of understand its importance and what you might personally do to enhance the way your acumen is perceived by your colleagues.